I was the kid in high school who'd ask people questions just so I could shout, "It doesn't matter what you think."
Jeremy, we got a huge guest today. I think we have the guest of guests. We have podcast royalty, Canadian royalty, 4-time Emmy Award winner, Chris Van Vliet.
And I thought I was a big fan of him, but clearly with that introduction that, far surpasses the ones you've given to any of our past guests, I definitely think that you're a very big fan of this man, maybe even a bigger fan than me. And hopefully by the end of this episode, you will all be big fans of his. You will all like and subscribe to what he's putting out there, because insight is really the top player when it comes to the podcast game right now. And so I am so excited to jump right into this. I hope you guys are too. So we might as well get this party started.
Let's get into the action. Yeah, so guys, we got Chris Van Vliet on the show. We got podcast royalty, Canadian royalty, 4-time Emmy Award winner, and most importantly, wrestling fan.
Yes, that is the most important. Guys, thank you so much for having me on. Always good to talk to fellow Canadians.
Yeah, I'm glad to have you on here. And you forgot one of the most important things is that he's also a huge wrestling fan and a hell of a good looking guy. So
give you a run for your money.
It's the first time I have some competition here, because usually they're used to me sitting next to your ugly ass.
Exactly. They put me next to him to make him look better, but now you're here, so we're going to have to fire him.
Got to step up my game.
Well, there you go. Well, the interview's over.
So
thanks for having us, Chris.
For those out there who probably don't know who he is, I'm going to allow him to have the floor. We know who he is, but maybe you'd like to tell people a few words about what you're all about, Chris.
Well, I'm originally from just outside of Toronto, Pickering, Ontario. Super passionate about broadcasting. Fell in love with wrestling in high school. Was a backyard wrestler with dreams of becoming a pro wrestler. Went to wrestling school and decided, I didn't want to, I had to make a decision. Was it wrestling school or school? Because I was doing them at the same time. Decided I would finish my broadcasting career, and really fortunate to be able to work in television and radio ever since. And, every once in a while, kind of dip my toe into the wrestling world, do these interviews, ring announce from time to time, take chops from Sean Spears and Tyler Breeze, But I'm a huge wrestling fan, just like you guys.
Awesome. That's what we love to hear. And we like to say wrestling is life, because, we live it, eat it, breathe it, sleep it. Wrestling is life, man. And I didn't know that you actually tried to be a wrestler beforehand. Was that here in Canada, or was that somewhere else on the road?
Yeah, I trained at the Squared Circle in Toronto. I was 20 at the time.
With Rob Fuego.
With Rob Fuego, yeah.
Look at that.
I was in the beginner ring with Chris Chambers and Ash, I guess now known as Ashley Six. I was there at the same time. They weren't training with me, but they were there. It was Tracy Brooks and Angelina Love. They were like in the advanced ring, just kind of like brushing up on their skills. So we're taking this back, man. This was 2003 is when I went to wrestling school.
That's really interesting, because I first went to wrestling school in 2003 here in Montreal for Jacques Rougeau. And along my way, I kind of branched out and I tried out a few other schools, one of which was Squared Circle with Rob Fuego as head trainer. And yeah, I remember Ash was there. Angelina Love was there as well. Also Chantal Taylor, even Sin Bodie was there at the time too. He was already established, but helping out. And yeah, tons of other people that made waves in the business. Great Canadian talent at that time. I was there for a week, just tried it out, wanted to see some different things. Then went down to Border City to Scott D'Amore's school and, saw how he did business down there. Really increased my appetite for wrestling, made me want to wrestle more in Ontario because up to that point I had only done Quebec. So what's interesting about that too is I know there's a bit of an age difference between us, despite your boyish good looks. I think you got a couple of years on me from what Wikipedia tells me, but that was a very close timeline to when I went there. So it's almost possible we could have crossed paths.
Oh, that's really interesting. Yes, Wikipedia is not lying. That is my actual age. I just have excellent lighting here. That's really it. But yeah, it's funny that in the Canadian wrestling world, you're going to go to one of 5, maybe 10 wrestling schools. And actually, before I decided on Squared Circle, I went to WrestlePlex Ontario, where Eric Young was the head trainer. It was in Cambridge. I was going to Wilfrid Laurier University in Waterloo. So I was like, it's a half-hour-ish drive. I went there with full intention that I was going to attend this school. And 10 minutes into me just watching the class, you only had 3 students that day. One of the students broke their arm.
Oh,
I'll never forget. I interviewed Eric recently and he's like, oh yeah, I remember that. And like the guy's arm is like hanging like this. And Eric's like, this doesn't happen all the time. This isn't a regular thing.
yeah. Well, I mean, that's the harsh reality of it. I mean, we're putting our lives on the line every time we step in there, even if it's just a practice session. One wrong bump could spell the end of a career. So as much as that's a freak occurrence, it could happen pretty much anytime, anywhere in a wrestling ring.
Well, sure. I mean, you're right. I mean, when you sign up to go to wrestling school or have a match, you're basically, admitting that something could go wrong. Hopefully it doesn't, but something bad could happen.
Yeah. And that's what people don't realize. You're putting a lot on the line. It's not just, you're putting up money to go in and learn, and then you're going to, become a millionaire. So many wrestlers don't get the chance to make it. And then you're risking your health, your good looks, your well-being. There can be long-term ramifications from something that goes wrong in a wrestling ring. I guess that's why we all got to be safe. We got to trust each other. It's why, people like Chris and I are cut out for this. People like you should stay as far away from a wrestling ring as possible.
I mean, I took that one chop.
You did.
When we had him on the show the first time, I asked him to chop me on air. It wasn't as intense as what you went through, but let me tell you, it didn't feel good. But like I tell everyone on the picture, I took a picture of it. I could have opened his phone with the thumbprint on my chest.
Yeah. Yeah.
So one chop and you were done. That was it.
One chop. And I was like, yep. Okay. I got that done.
Yeah. Maybe when we're done, we can send you the picture. He looked like a mix of, I don't know, like blood and tapioca pudding.
Oh my God. Yeah, everyone always asks me about this chop video, and I get it. It has a ton of views online. The idea was actually Shawn Spears' idea. He was like, if you're going to come to my wrestling school, cool. My idea was I'll take a few bumps, I'll lock it up. Maybe I'll take a few scoop slams or something like that. And he goes, what if I gave you a chop? And I'm like, oh, okay, sure. Like that's not that interesting. Like one chop. I said, why don't you line up all your students and then have them all chop me? He goes, are you sure? I'm like, yeah, why not? I make for a great video. You only have 8 students. No problem. He goes, they haven't learned chops yet. I'm like, oh, all right, even better. Sure. Then I get into the ring and realize that they all get 2 chops, and then Breeze and Spears were going to give me a chop as well. So I'm like, 20 chops. Like, oh my, and it's like, it was too late at that point. And it made for a very memorable video. I had multiple handprints across my chest for the next 6 days. And yeah, I don't know if I would do it again.
Well, I think it's great that you stepped up to the plate and were willing to do that. I mean, that already puts you ahead of so many people out there on the independent scene that would shy away from even 1 or 2 chops. You took 20. And you might remember I made a comment on your Twitter where I said, now you've paid more dues than these guys out there. Maybe you might want to consider making it a full-time career.
I don't know about that. I mean, I think the biggest thing, and the biggest thing about getting into a pro wrestling ring is it hurts so much more than you would ever expect. Like, there are no springs under there. There's not a trampoline. It is not bouncy. Hitting the ropes for the first time is one of the most painful things you will ever do in your whole life. I don't know how you guys get used to this.
I think I'm the exception to the rule because I've been doing this for 15 years. By the grace of God, never had an injury, never broke a bone, never had a concussion.
I'll knock on wood for you.
Yeah, I'm really an anomaly when it comes to that. But I do firmly believe that from my early days in training, my body adapted to it because I was just like you when I think of my first months in wrestling where there'd be weeks I'd go and I'd practice and man, like I'd feel it for 2 weeks. I wouldn't be able to walk. I'd be, walking with a limp. I felt like I was like a 100-year-old man overnight. But I just think that the body kind of adapts to it. And that's why so many guys will say the more you're on the road, the more frequently you're working, the less you are prone to injury. It's not like you're getting weaker and weaker, you're getting stronger. And I've experienced it firsthand. I've done 30-day tours, literally Sunday to Sunday, no days off, 30 days, show every day, doing the stuff I do, moonsaults, dives, 450s, all that kind of stuff. And I came out of it unscathed. So I really think the body kind of develops a callus and it allows you to be able to perform at that level. It's, you build up that resistance as you go along.
Well, I think it's a little bit of that. It's also like your body's just like used to going that speed all the time. Like it's like when you're driving on the 401 going 130 kilometers an hour,
which is quite a ticket, by the way.
It is quite a ticket, but you're driving along and you're like, yeah, I'm not going that fast. I'm keeping up with everybody else. And you look down, you're like, oh, wow, I'm way over the speed limit. And I feel like that's kind of what it's like. You know, the more you do this, the more reps you get in, I think you're, like you said, your body just kind of goes, yeah, that's it. That's all you got.
Yeah. I mean, who knows, maybe we'll be feeling it, 40, 50 years down the line when, we're all geriatric and need a walker and whatnot. But for now, I mean, I don't feel like wrestling has had that big of a wear and tear on me. And I do attribute a lot of that to the fact that I've had a pretty extensive schedule, never taken a break, tried to wrestle as much as possible. And obviously trained and got in shape for this, because the more muscle mass you have, the more shock absorption you got too. So.
Yeah, it's a great way to look at it. I mean, every time I interview a wrestler who's like in their late 30s or 40s or 50s, I'm always like, what hurts on you the most? And it's always so interesting. Knees, back. I just interviewed Sabu and he was like, oh, my lower back's killing me. I'm like, well, yeah, I mean, it all has to catch up to you at some point.
Yeah, definitely. And speaking of... Oh, yeah.
It's like, yeah, you're Sabu. Of course you're in pain.
Well, yeah, but Sabu took it to the extreme over a lot of years.
Yeah.
Like, we weren't doing the barbed wire exploding ring matches, much like we're going to see in AEW pretty soon.
Yeah, the exploding barbed wire death match.
But before you killed my segue there, Kyle, I was going to say, building up muscle mass and whatnot, people might not be able to tell from looking at this, but you actually have quite a physique. I was commentating to my executive producer here who showed me the chop picture that, you're in a lot better shape than a lot of guys we see on the indies. I'd be curious to know what your training regimen is like.
I look back at that chop photo and that was almost exactly a year ago. It was a little over a year ago. And I was like, yeah, I had some mass, but like, I'm usually, in all honesty, I'm usually in much better shape. And I guess I didn't really plan for the fact that I would be taking my shirt off in the wrestling ring. I literally thought I'd be taking some bumps when I went there. But I've been working out since I was 15. I'm usually 5 or 6 days a week. Like, I don't drink coffee because I can't imagine me with even more energy, which would be insane. So my coffee every morning is going to the gym. And that's been such a big part of my day, is just staying active and just doing something every day where your body is moving. So I look forward to I turned 38 in 3 months, which is crazy. And I'm looking forward to at 38, 39, 40, being in the best shape of my life at those ages. And I look back, I did a photo shoot a few years ago when I was living in Miami. And we had 8 weeks to prepare. And you know all about this. We had 8 weeks to prepare. We dialed it all in, did the water loading and everything. And I showed up absolutely shredded for an hour and a half. And then after that, it was just I had no energy.
Yep. But I mean, all that matters is the pictures that they take.
That's right. I have these great photos for the rest of my life.
You're immortalized forever looking like that. And that's all people are going to remember. So you see, Kyle, you could take a lesson from him. You want to be at the top of the podcast game. You can't be looking like a fat tub of goo like yourself. You got to get your ass in the gym.
I have a workaround for that because I did the same thing a couple years ago. I went and got a fitted suit and took a bunch of pictures in that fitted suit. And now I just use them as recent photos because I looked great in it. Because when you're bald, your hairstyle never changes. Little tip for all you fatties out there. You can get away with it.
So does the suit still fit?
No, it doesn't. The vest is never going to be worn again, but the jacket still works. So,
and
6 weeks from now, you could fit in that suit if you wanted to.
Yeah, I know. I could,
but Jeremy can make this happen for you.
I've been doing DDPY, so we'll see. Yep. So shout out to DDP for that one.
You're right. You're right. Jeremy could definitely make that happen, but I do charge a pretty high premium that might be a little bit out of his price range. With that said,
he makes me listen to more than one story about himself. That's the price.
So we shed a lot of light on your time in Canada, although I am still curious to know about what made you stop at the wrestling school at Squared Circle at the time.
So it was really just a matter of I came to a crossroads. So I was training there in the summer between my second and third year of university. And it was an hour away. I was living in Waterloo and this was in Toronto, and it was an hour away. It was $250 a month. And it was just I know this will always be here. Whereas school's something I'm in the middle of right now. I really was very passionate about getting my communication studies degree, always been super passionate about broadcasting. And I just figured wrestling school would always be there. And I didn't want to half-ass either of them. I wanted to be able to put my full ass into, one or the other. And it's very important to put your full ass into it. So when school started up that September, it was just like, all right, I'm going to leave wrestling school for now, but it'll always be there one day. And then I just, my broadcasting career just really got rolling. And I went, yeah, let's follow this path again with my full ass.
Seemed to be the right choice. I mean, you're killing it.
Well, it's very kind of you to say, but like I said, it's so cool to have my foot firmly planted in broadcasting and then just be able to dabble into wrestling, whenever I feel like it.
Yeah. And I mean, for me, broadcasting was always one of my first loves. I was a writer. I was a written journalist. That's what I studied in school. Before the whole podcast thing blew up, like we're talking about back in, this would have been maybe like 2003, 2004, right around when I started getting into wrestling, actually wrestling school. I started hosting a radio wrestling show with a colleague of mine on our college radio. And so it was pretty much just broadcast within the school and maybe a few blocks with people who had, radios that could receive it. But we stuck with that. And we actually managed to get it onto TSN radio after a couple of years. So that was a pretty big accomplishment for me. I can't take all the credit. I can't even take half the credit because my broadcast partner, he hustled that. He was more into radio broadcast and we were able to do that. And I was part of the show for 3 years. Show is still going now. I'll throw them a plug. It's called Ringside Report. Talks about MMA as well as professional wrestling. Wrestling Uncensored was the name that we had, but now it's all under Ringside Report. So yeah, journalism was always a big thing for me too. And I kind of did like you. I pursued my education at the same time as I pursued wrestling. Right out of high school, I jumped into wrestling school while attending college. And so yeah, we've kind of had a bit of a similar path in that regard, you and I.
Yeah. And I'm also one of those people that like when I love something and when I'm passionate about it, like I just dive right in. I don't check the temperature of the water. I don't check the depth of the water. I just dive all the way in. And in my senior year, my final, man, what an American term. I've been living here way too long. In my 4th year of university, I had this epiphany. I had a great time living in Waterloo and being at Laurier. I lived with 4 of my best friends. We drank lots of beer. We had a great time. And I remember waking up like a week or two into my final year. And I went, oh my God, when we graduate this year, like we have to go to work like for the rest of our lives. And like all this fun that we're having right now. And like, do I feel like going to class? The answer was usually no. No, I don't feel like going to class. Like that wouldn't be an option when it came to having a job. And it was in that exact moment, I had this epiphany and I went, I don't want to hate my job. Like I want to have a job that I can at least kind of look forward to going to. I didn't want to be one of those people that hated Sunday because Monday was the next day. So I reached out to every radio station, every TV station in Kitchener-Waterloo and basically said, hey, I'm a really passionate communication studies student. Can I come in and see how it's done in the real world? And that's what like really changed my life, was like asking for the things that I wanted and then chasing after it and not taking no for an answer.
Wow. That's an incredible message to anyone out there, not just, people wanting to build a podcast, but even just people in the world trying to get their foot in the door anywhere. And, the more I hear you talk, the more I really feel we got a lot of points in common, because that's something that I've been through and I've helped to learn thanks to these guys here in the podcast game, which, I'm a wrestler and I was a journalist, but these guys, they really got the podcast on lockdown. They know it left, right, and center. And the more I realize, the more you get yourself out there, the more you ask for things, more doors are going to open. And, worst thing they can do is say no, but whenever a door closes, another one opens. And I think that that's something that this game has actually taught me. And yeah, you're definitely speaking the gospel and you're speaking to the choir when you say that.
It's just such an important thing to know that when you ask for something, literally, you just said it, the worst thing that could happen is someone says no. That's the worst. And for most of the time, you won't get an answer at all, which is also okay. But if someone out there is doing the thing that you want to do, that just means that it's possible for you to also do it. You just have to figure out like, what's their path to get there. Yeah. Maybe they're at step 17 and you're at step 1. Well, figure out what step 16, 15, 14, 13, all the way back to where you are is. And now you have a roadmap to do anything you want.
Yeah. It's so similar to what the great Chris Jericho told me ages ago. He was actually my first interview when I was working at the college paper. Yeah, first interview. I didn't even think I was going to get it. We just, we got a presser being a college paper. He was coming into town to do a concert for Fozzy. It was like right when he had left WWE in 2004. And I said, I want that story. Put me on it. It'll be front page material. And literally it was. Talked to him. He gave me over an hour of his time. We talked about everything under the sun. And at the end of it, I told him, hey, I'm a wrestler myself. what kind of advice do you have for me? And he said almost what you said there. He said that, it's going to be hard. It's going to take a lot of work, but if you stick with it, work as hard as you can, you will make it. Look at me. I made it. I made it. You can make it too. And like you said, it's knowing those steps. It's just not taking no for an answer, being willing to, if you can't get in through a door, then, sneak in through a back window. There's always a way in.
Yeah. There's a quote that I absolutely love. It's easy now, hard later. Hard now, easy later.
Great quote.
And that's kind of what your podcast is about, insight. You kind of just like to break down and see what drives people to achieve their goals or be their best selves.
Yeah, I'm just fascinated by people who are at the very top of their game. And I want to figure out how they did it. Like, what are the tools and tactics to get to that spot that they're at now? Because I think that we all have it in ourselves. It's just a matter of, do you want to apply yourself? So, I'm talking to some of the biggest wrestlers in the world, some of the biggest entrepreneurs, entertainers, celebrities. And I just want to figure out, like, what was your path to get here? Because so often we just see the finished product and you don't see the struggle that people had when they were 15 or 18 or 20 or 25 or whatever. And I think it's so important to highlight that. And it's also important for people that are starting off to go, oh, wow, I did a really similar thing, or I could do a similar thing.
Yep. And I've definitely had a few of those aha moments hearing you talk here. Now, one of the things that's really cool about you, and it kind of puts you in that category, is that, my agenda has always been Canadian talent making it on the big stage in the United States for the major companies. You have been able to achieve that, and I'd almost say surpass that. And in a lot of ways, you're a self-made man. You were able to do this pretty much, yourself by creating your YouTube channel, and then everyone took notice. I'd like to know, how did that come about? Exactly. What was your path?
So we'd be taking this back quite a ways. So after I had my epiphany, after I reached out to all the radio stations and TV stations in my college town, it was time to graduate. And I went, well, I need an internship, because I would assume that an internship would lead to a job. Reached out everywhere. Didn't hear back from anybody at all. Checks TV in Peterborough, Ontario. I was like, well, that's close-ish. I live in Pickering. It's an hour-ish away. I found the email address for the general manager of the TV station, and I sent him an email and said, hey, I'm going to be there next week for my reading week. It'd just be great to come in and just talk to you about, like, how this works. What, how you do it in the real world. And he goes, well, if you're going to be in town, sure, come on by. It'd be great to talk to you. This was a complete lie. I had no plans to go to Peterborough, Ontario, but I was like, if I could talk my way into the building, sure. And 5 minutes into the meeting, he goes, we don't usually take on interns that aren't affiliated with, a college program and that you're not getting credits, but I see something in you. So what the heck? Why not? I'm like, oh my gosh. So long story short, that internship turned into a job. I was driving an hour each way from Pickering to Peterborough, working my high school job at the fish department of PJ's Pet Center, a pet store, scooping dead fish and goldfish so I could pay for the gas to drive to my job. So that's where it really began. From there, I got a job on Razor TV, which was MTV2 in Vancouver. Packed up my car, drove 47 hours from Toronto to Vancouver, was hosting a show there. And this is where things really started to take a turn for that bigger stage of America, like you're talking about there, Jeremy. I was on this show for a year. It was amazing. I interviewed some of the biggest celebrities in the world, some of the biggest musicians. I was reviewing video games as part of my job. And then CTV bought out Chum. I was working for Chum at the time, and our show just got canceled like that. And I went, oh my God, I'm 2.5 years into my broadcasting career. What do I do now? I don't have a job. And now I'm in this city that's, the other side of the country. So I packed up my car, drove back, moved back in with my parents, and then just started looking for work. And I would be like the final 2 or 3 for a job, or in the final 5 for a job, and I wouldn't get it. And I went, well, if I can't get a job in my own country, I'm going to start to look elsewhere. And that's when I started sending my reel out to agents in the US. And an incredible agency in Los Angeles said, yeah, next time you're here, we'd love to have a meeting with you. So I booked a flight to LA, met with them, and I signed with an agency in the US. And then from that point, got a whole bunch of auditions in the US, but I wasn't able to ever get any of these jobs because I didn't have a visa. And it took 2 years my agent finally said, well, in the meantime, I was hosting a show in Toronto, but my agent said, how would you feel about being an entertainment reporter for the CBS affiliate in Cleveland? And I went, sounds good to me. Sure. Will they pay for my visa? I said, yeah, I think so. Went down, auditioned, they gave me the job. And that's when things really started to change for me. That was in 2010. Like my first week of work, I was covering the Oscars, like on the red carpet at the Oscars. Then I went to the Grammys. I was fortunate to win, my 4 Emmys when I was there. And that's when things really started to change for me, is I was able to be on television in the US. And, I love Canada. I have such a huge place in my heart for Canada. But in terms of broadcasting, there's not a ton of jobs. And I started to look around, and if I wasn't Rick Campanelli or I wasn't George Stroumboulopoulos, I love both those guys. They are my broadcasting idols. But if I wasn't one of them, where was I going to work? So the cool thing about coming to the US is there's just so many more jobs and so many more opportunities here. And I'm trying to take advantage of as many of them as I can.
And obviously the same applies for wrestling, where, as I say on a weekly basis, we really have it rough here in Canada. And I don't think it's just limited to wrestling. Obviously, that's the industry that I'm in. That's the one that, I've seen this struggle firsthand. But in general, artists in Canada, anyone who knows that the big money is in the United States, we're restricted because, work visas are hard to acquire, the things that we need to justify. Have you seen maybe any of the material that I've put out in regards to this about Canada? Are you kind of up to speed, or do you want me to?
Yeah, I saw it on your Twitter. Yeah.
Okay. And that's why I reached out to you, because obviously you're very well respected throughout the wrestling community. Your voice can go such a long way. And that's one of the main reasons why I wanted to have you on here, was to, talk about this with you, because obviously you rub shoulders with more people with more authority in wrestling than I do. I'm just a guy with, less than 300 Twitter followers, but, a lot of heart, a lot of guts, and I'm a somewhat good orator. So I've taken on this crusade. But we face a lot of difficulty here, since we can't go wrestle in the United States at a time where there's more jobs than ever. And it's so inconvenient to hire someone from Canada because there's so much more red tape, paperwork, money, which I've always said, for me, it's not a case of the money, because if I could just throw money at this problem, make it go away, I would gladly do it. But unfortunately, it's getting a company to back you. It's getting them to ask the government on your behalf. And then you have to justify that you're an exceptional performer, can do the job better than an American citizen. So you're not taking a job away from them. And this is why we don't see more Canadians on the independent scene and in big companies. And I think a bigger problem is that they're not even aware, because, like, for example, you had the chance to talk to TJ Wilson. We had the chance to talk to TJ also. I've known TJ for 10 years, one of the most supportive people of me in WWE. And even TJ said he wasn't even aware. And the fact that WWE's hiring process is based on, they look at extras at TV. From there, they send them to Florida. They do their week-long tryouts. And then from there, they decide, are they going to put them in NXT, what they're going to do with them. And I said, there's an injustice in the system there, because they only come to Canada maybe twice a year. There have been times where here in Montreal, we haven't even gotten a show in 2 years, TV tapings. They'll bring house shows every so often, but they don't try out extras. I used to wrestle in New England, in Massachusetts predominantly. And the guys there would tell me, oh yeah, I've been an extra 5-6 times this year alone. Like, I'm a guy who's had 4 WWE TV tryouts over the course of his 15-year career. They've had more tryouts in a calendar year than I get. They're getting way more looks. And it's not just me, because it's all Canadians here who can try to go into the United States and wrestle, but the border might stop them, and at worst might ban them for 5 years, if not longer. And then there's always that risk. And it's like, I've been turned away before. I've been searched. I've been everything short of cavity searched, as I say all the time in these interviews. And there's that risk. So a lot of times they don't realize that, even though we're all Americans, as I like to say, just because we're not part of the United States portion of North America doesn't mean that we're not Americans. But they don't realize that we don't have those opportunities. We would gladly drive the 7, 8, 9, 10 hours to all the big name indies to go there and perform. I've had offers from places like Texas and Florida and all these other feds that I have to turn down because I can't legally go because of how difficult it is to obtain a work visa. Furthermore, even the work visa process to get it, if I'm not mistaken, it's a 3-step process that has to go through several approvals. You need a lawyer for that. You have to put up the money, and they could refuse you with no money back guarantee on that either. So there's just so much risk involved in it. And I do believe that what needs to happen is that we need better scouting in Canada. We need people to look at Canada and say, they can't come here, we should watch them, because I firmly believe in my heart of hearts that we have future main eventers, champions, Hall of Famers even, but we're going unnoticed. In the States, it's kind of easy. There's more jobs than ever. And it's really just a case of putting in the work and, to a certain extent, just being good at one thing. I mean, I watch wrestling, I see guys and they are great on the microphone, but that's all they bring to the table. Or they're great acrobats and that's all they bring to the table. Or they're a great, physique. They're a body guy. And that's really it. And those guys are, making big money, more than me and Kyle and our executive producer will make in our entire life, probably in a calendar year. But we have guys here in Canada like myself where I say, I'm kind of well-rounded. I do a lot of things pretty good. And there are a lot of other great talents, I feel, that have the tools, but they don't look at us because, we're not wrestling on those.
But I also think it's important for to make yourself discoverable, right? Like, we're living in a time now where the scouts don't physically need to come and watch you work the match. If you make a big enough buzz for yourself online, I think that can definitely turn some heads and get you called down for an audition. I just did an interview with John Silver, who said he worked as an extra like 5 times in WWE. And I said, well, did you ever think after any of those extra appearances that you would get like a contract? He's like, oh, like, no, not at all. Like, they look at extras like we might as well just be a piece of furniture. Like, you're just there, like wearing your suit, not talking to anybody. And he said, I knew that when I went and had my first appearance with AEW, it was going to be a completely different thing. So I think it's important. And I did this in my career before I got a visa in the US, is make yourself undeniable. Do everything you can to make yourself be noticed online. Like, sure, you might live in a different country because there's a border there, and I'm from that country, but we all live in this like global world, and we're all connected by this supercomputer that lives in our pocket. And if you can turn your followers into thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, and you really start making a name for yourself, that's, I think, when you start to turn into the Ethan Pages and the Sean Spears and the Michael Elgins of the world, who, were wrestling in those border cities and those border states like Detroit and Buffalo and Ohio, and you get noticed, and you get noticed by enough people, and then things start to change.
That's actually been the point of this show too. Sorry. It was just, we wanted to, when we first started this, we were just reviewing wrestling weekly, week by week. And it didn't get stale, but it's just like, you want more. So what we started to do is we started looking for local independent wrestlers. We started with Jeremy just to shed some light on the Montreal independent wrestling scene and hopefully get some of these bigger companies or in the middle companies to just kind of look over and be like, hey, look at those guys. Like, that was the whole point of this show. And like, we provided the soapbox for Jeremy to stand on to tell all these people this. So,
yeah.
Well, Chris makes a lot of outstanding points. You really do. And it's true. You have to be undeniable. You have to put in the work. What I feel, however, is kind of lost in translation in a lot of that. And I'll talk about like John Silver, for example, with his tryouts. I've done tryouts as well. I've personally killed it in my tryouts, in my opinion. But
there's a difference between tryouts and working as an extra, though.
Yeah. I made the most of, I did a week-long tryout for FCW back in
that's great.
2009 when Steve Kern was running it. I feel I killed it there. I wrestled Jinder Mahal in the final match of that camp that we did. I knew him already from the independents. We had already worked together, got along really well. They were only able to give out one contract. They gave it to him minutes after the match that we had. I personally feel I killed it there. I was literally pulled aside by Steve Kern. He's like, you got nothing to worry about. You have a future in this business. And I mean, like, I to the point where I say, if I were able to do it over now, having gained so much more experience, I don't think I would have done as well. That's just how the stars aligned for that one. Sure. But again, falling through the cracks, don't really know why. Did some TVs where, I make a lot of noise. I make myself known. I have one of these personalities. I'm kind of like a lightning bolt, man. Like, you're going to know I exist. Had it out with John Laurinaitis because I guess I was just created without any fear in me. But had it out with him and things were going in the right direction. Got a match on SmackDown. and they looked at me in some promos. They felt my promos were a little over the top. So that was something that, I had to work on. Went back, the administration kind of changed, and I guess I didn't really fit the mold anymore. Although they loved my promos, they felt my footwork needed some work. Went and took boxing courses. I'm the kind of guy where, they'll give me the critique, I'll take the advice, and I'll apply it. So that way, there's nothing to deny me on.
Sure.
But I'll refer to my tryouts with TNA, for example. I did one of their gut check tryouts in Plattsburgh, New York. Absolutely killed it. D'Lo Brown, Jeff Jarrett, Jeremy Borash, they loved me. Like from the moment I got there, I was the first guy they shot in promos. They probably, I could have been as bad as the Great Khali as a wrestler for all they knew. But they shot me in a promo. Borash took it up to Jeff Jarrett, who was in the rafters. He came down and pulled me aside. I was the only one he pulled aside and talked to. I don't know. I have this effect on people. But all that to say, I kept following up on that and kept talking to them. And D'Lo Brown was mostly my go-to. He was a great guy, took good care of me. He told me, because I just said, it's been a while. I'm seeing you guys bringing in other guys. They're bringing in DJZ. They're bringing in, a lot of these other guys. And I'm like, guys that are kind of like my size, do the same kind of stuff I do. And I'm like, what's going to give here? And he said, well, we got some guys that are in the yes pile, that are in the maybe pile. You're in the maybe pile for reasons he didn't really want to say it. So I just called him out and I said, does it have to do with the fact that I'm Canadian? And he straight up admitted to me that, yes, it had to do with me being Canadian and they are not hiring Canadians. And that was a firm stance, to which I said, if it's a money issue, I'll put up the money. But that was literally, I was denied there. And I don't think D'Lo was lying to me. He might have been, but
that can't be the case if Josh Alexander and Ethan Page were there for so long.
Well, if you get Josh Alexander and Ethan Page in an interview, maybe you can ask them what the circumstances were around their.
I think they have the same visa that I had. I know one visa.
You can ask them. I don't know. I can't speculate, but we're talking about two different administrations too, because my tryouts
that could be it too.
My tryouts were 2011 when it was Hogan, Bischoff, I guess Dixie Carter. They were still in charge. It wasn't Anthem. So maybe things have changed. I can't fault a new administration for mistakes of the old one, but I was literally told exactly that. If you ever get D'Lo Brown in an interview,
D'Lo's still there. If you still have, if you're still in touch with D'Lo, he's a good person to reach out to.
I'd love to get him in an interview. I'm sure he'd have no problems confirming that because it's literally what he told me. And D'Lo was pulling for me hard. He was very accommodating to me. I have no ill will towards him, but I was straight up told that by the company, we are not hiring Canadians. And more so, I think what we're up against is not a case of talent and undeniability, but it's the fact that we can't go and rub shoulders with these guys on a weekly basis. Let's face it. You can tell how good of a wrestler is from a YouTube video. You can tell how good he speaks and whatnot, but you can't tell if he has a good mind for the business, if he has a good attitude in a locker room, if he's a fun guy to be around. You can't tell if the guy is a rapist or a sexual predator, like we saw with the speaking out movement. That's just the reality of it. You can't scrutinize those things without seeing the person. And if you're not someone who's in a locker room with them to go and put in a word and vouch for them and open the door for them, that's what we're missing out on. We're just here in Canada. Yeah, we got great wrestlers. We got great promo guys with great looks. But those intangible X factors aren't being exploited and aren't being made known because we aren't around these guys. So obviously they're going to refer people they know and that they can trust.
What's stopping you from, COVID's obviously a big thing now, but in a normal world, what's stopping you from driving across the border to just rub shoulders, not to be booked on these shows, but to just rub shoulders with promoters and wrestlers in upstate New York, Ohio, Michigan? What's stopping you from that?
The border believing that that's what I'm going there to do. So, I could definitely do that. And believe me, a light bulb just went off when you said that. But when it comes down to it, I've been in situations I was denied. The one time I was denied at the border, I was simply going to train. A buddy of mine has a wrestling school out of Massachusetts, calls it the Bell Time Club. I think it's still in business. Don't know why I haven't thrown him a plug on any of our episodes till now.
Now we got one.
But just going to train at his school, and they denied me. They're like, we don't believe you. We feel that there's a chance you're going to go there to wrestle. You got your boots with you. You got your gear with you. And maybe stupid on me to have had that with me, but I was pretty much denied.
Maybe you mail it and then you meet it there. But I think the other thing is you're allowed to legally be a tourist in the US for 6 months minus a day. Mm-hmm. There's an idea too. You could live and maybe, work under the table or something for 6 months minus a day every single year.
Sweet talk a lady down there, get a house.
Yeah.
I already have a lady in my life.
Get yourself a green card.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's how a lot of guys have done it. You know, you brought up a guy like Eric Young. That's how he got his citizenship there in the United States.
Well, that's how Taya got hers as well.
Yeah.
But I mean, there's definitely a way, right? And this goes back to what we were saying before of like, find someone who's done it and then figure out how they did it. And I think when you look at some of these guys who are Canadian wrestlers and worked on the independent scene for a long time, like I've known Cody Diener since we were both in Waterloo together, and I was watching him like climb the ranks, and look what he's doing in Impact now. So I think it's possible. It's just, you got to find what that path is for you.
Mm-hmm. Well, you've definitely given me some food for thought. I tell you what, I might even consider forgiving you for that little stunt you pulled the last time when you sent me to Balboa Bakery and ended up starting the interview without me like a degenerate.
I thought it was open. I'm sorry. I didn't know.
No, I'm sorry. I didn't know.
But speaking of Balboa Bakery over at 102 Saint Jean Baptiste, local 52, you guys want to head over there right now. They're working on new things all the time. It's never the same menu. They're mad scientists over there, guys. So if you like surprises, head on over to Balboa Bakery. And
I am still waiting on those donuts. So Cannoli Boss, hook a brother up.
And those Kit Kat donuts, send them over.
And yeah, I mean, there's definitely a way. My way is I'm going to make enough noise about it that, you know, someone's going to take notice. And it's not just me. I mean, obviously I have my own career, which I know better than any career because I've lived it my entire life.
Yeah.
But I think that there are a lot of Canadians that didn't even think this was an issue, thinking that we're already on the same level playing field as people in the United States. And it's just not the case. And
yeah.
I hope that with every interview that I do with someone like yourself that actually has a massive following and is well respected within the pro wrestling community, you could also help to shed some light on this, that we got a lot of great wrestlers in Canada that are, you know, like trees falling in the forest and nobody's hearing them.
Yeah. Well, I mean, then this isn't just Canada. This is if you're born in any other country that's not America. And I think that Mexican wrestlers struggle with this. I think that UK wrestlers struggle with this. Japanese wrestlers struggle with this, and, you know, throw in a whole bunch of other countries as well. This is just the way that, you know, the laws are in America, but there are ways to figure this out. There are ways to like do this. And I was very, very patient and very persistent till I got my O1 visa, but it took a long time to find a company to go, yeah, we'll do that. And it's a long, expensive, painstaking process. And the whole time after I submitted it, I just went, oh my God. Oh, I hope that they say yes. And this is how bureaucratic America is sometimes. So they said, we'll give you a response in, I think it was like, we'll give you a response in 2 to 4 months. Or if you want to pay for the expedited response in 14 business days, it costs $1,200 extra. And I went, all right, sure. Then when I applied for my green card, they went, you'll get an answer in 8 to 11 months. 8 to 11 months. But if you want to pay the $1,500 expedited fee, we'll give you a response in 14 days.
Yep.
Wow. Basically, you pay that extra money for it to be the top of the list, which is crazy. But all that's to say, it is possible.
Yep.
And I think, you know, I always say vague goals get vague results. If you make that your specific goal, I think you'll be able to accomplish it.
Oh, well, I've always been a person who's been very laser focused, and that is my goal. I have a few companies in mind, which realistically are the only ones that can actually endorse you for this kind of thing. And it's funny because I just kind of had a moment there where I was like, yeah, that what you're talking about with putting in that extra money, it's almost sounding like American healthcare.
I haven't had much experience with American healthcare, but I will say, I really liked how it works in Canada.
Just every time you start to feel sick, just hop on a plane back. You'll be fine.
I don't think I have OHIP anymore. Yeah. So, yeah, the cool thing about, you know, going to the hospital or doctor in Canada is you don't have to think like, what's my copay? And you guys as Canadians are like, what's a copay period? And like, yeah, like I go in and like, okay, so have I reached my copay minimum for the year? Like, this is seriously what happens when you go to the doctor here.
Yeah, my dad lives in New York, so every time he's like, "Oh yeah, we had to run to the emergency room real quick." Like, I'm like, "Well, yeah, you should have just came across the border. You would have been fine." He's like, yeah. "Oh, I know. Why'd you move, you dummy?"
You might have had to wait
seriously.
Yeah. So, I actually had some questions from some fans. He's a big fan of yours. He's a buddy of mine. His name is Sonny.
Sonny.
Yeah. He's the one who actually not introduced me to you, but he's the one who got me involved in like learning about you.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah. So he wanted to know
like
that
Sonny.
He's going to lose his mind that you've said his name twice now.
3 times, Sonny.
So he wanted to know, you're in Virtual Basement's new wrestling game as an announcer. Is there any plans to have you as a playable character? What would your wrestling background?
Man, I would lose it if they made me a playable character. I mean, they're doing all the animations to make my character walk and talk and do everything else. I think it would just be a matter of them clicking a few buttons and I'm a character in that game. But who knows? Who knows? I mean, I think the attire that I have for my character is ring announcer attire. So I got a full fitted suit. So bring it right back to that. So I don't know if we'd want me wrestling in that suit, but I'm going to say, look, anything's possible. And I think that it'd be really cool if that did happen.
I mean, if Val Venus can wrestle in a suit, I'm sure Chris Van Vliet can wrestle in a suit.
I wrestled Val Venus. Wow. He was in gym shorts and a t-shirt.
See, there you go.
Yeah. And the Good Father.
Yeah. The Good Father, Steven Richards at the time.
Yeah. Steven. Wow. Yeah.
Ivory too had a suit. She had the little bonnet bow tie thing.
Right.
Even
Right
Mick
to censor. The worst entrance music in all of wrestling.
When he was hardcore champion.
Oh my. Yeah. We actually had the Godfather on a couple weeks ago and he was talking about it and he was, oh man, I don't think he likes to talk about it very much, but yeah, no, he wasn't. I don't think he's a big fan of his right to censor run, but yeah, no, worst announcing music in the world.
Absolutely.
And I still hold them responsible for getting rid of the cat in WWE. I was a huge cat fan when I was 13.
Yes. Might have been Jerry Lawler, but who knows?
Yeah, we'll find out one day. So you actually got signed as an announcer for AEW. Any chance on you're going to be full-time there or?
I mean, I was asked to be part of the first episode, which was so cool. I mean, as a massive wrestling fan, to be part of a wrestling show on TNT for the first time in 18 years. And I played a very small part there, but to be that tiny little part in that historic show was so, so cool. And that was all I expected it to be. I just thought it would be that one episode and then randomly got a call on a Monday and they were like, hey, are you busy tomorrow? We need you to come to Charleston, West Virginia. And I'm like, okay. So my one appearance on the debut episode turned into 2 appearances and who knows? I mean, I would love to go back there and do more work, but it's a strange time we're living in right now with COVID. And I think a lot of crews are working with, a lot less people than they were having before. So man, who knows? But I would love to make that happen again.
Well, I, for one, think that you'd be a welcomed addition, at least to my TV screen as a backstage interviewer. Because I don't know, with Marvez, sometimes when he's not on the receiving end of a super kick from the Bucks, he looks like he might be falling into a diabetic coma. So I think they need some new blood, some young blood in there in the interviewing. And, you're more than a proven commodity when it comes to that. So hopefully we'll be seeing more of you on AEW.
And I don't see you getting pushed around like Marvez. So
I think I might push back, though. That's the thing.
Exactly.
I mean, as much as I love wrestling and that's one of my great passions, I also just love broadcasting in general. And I don't want to just be the wrestling broadcaster, which is why on my show, I interview people from all different walks of life. So if it happens, awesome. If it doesn't happen, also awesome.
Pretty cool. And speaking of people from other walks of life that you've interviewed, I noticed recently you did an interview with Paige Van Zandt ahead of her fight at the.
I was just listening to that in my car on the way here.
Oh, with Paige Van Zandt?
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Oh, yeah, her bare knuckle debut.
Her bare knuckle debut, which she unfortunately lost, but looks like she'll be back eventually. I was wondering, are you an MMA guy?
Yeah, big time. I've been a fan since UFC 2, renting it from Blockbuster. Remember those days? There was a separate little sports section and there was UFC 1, 2, 3, 4. So yeah, I've been a huge UFC fan since the 90s. And I've been able to interview quite a few people like Stipe Miocic when I lived in Cleveland. He became a friend of mine. I just had Corey Sandhagen on who had that badass flying knee knockout on Frankie Edgar. So yeah, big UFC fan. I've been to a handful of UFC events. I saw George St. Pierre fight in person at the Rogers Center, which I don't know if it gets much better than seeing UFC with 50,000 other fans.
That was the Jake Shields fight, right?
That's right. Yeah. 50,000 fans or however many, maybe 53. I don't know.
When Mark Hominick stole the show with that
man, there was
the hematoma.
Yeah.
I looked at this. Yeah, that's right. I looked at this card the other day and I was like, I forgot. I forgot how like stacked that card was.
That was when I found UFC was like an event. Like, you know, there was one a month. You gather your buddies, you go see it. Now there's one every week. They're just so watered down. I find it's not as big as a spectacle as it used to be. Like, yeah, we got Conor McGregor and all that crap. But like, I mean, like back in the day, you'd go, Rampage would be fighting on the card. Opening the card would be Forrest Griffin. You'd have Rashad Evans. Like, just it would be stacked from top to bottom.
Well,
but I will say that UFC is the one sport that has absolutely crushed during COVID. Every other sport has, really been struggling to make this work. UFC is just dominating.
Yeah. I thought they were the one sport that works better without fans.
I would argue that might be the case.
Yeah.
No, and I would kind of disagree with you, Kyle, because I like the fact that there's so many UFC events. And, I'm probably as big of a fan as Chris. Sounds like he's a pretty diehard fan. And man, I like the fact that I can just relax on a Saturday night and watch some fights every week. To me, the fight nights are just as good as the pay-per-views. Yeah. Oftentimes they're even better than the pay-per-views. And the way I always tell people about UFC is, give it a chance for like a month. You'll definitely see at least somebody that you like, whether it's their fighting style, whether it's their personality, their promos, whatever it is, and you'll want to see them fight again, and you'll get hooked on it. I think it's one of the easiest sports to get hooked on if you like, combat, if you like martial arts, similar to wrestling.
Yeah,
I just kind of feel like you have to be rich to enjoy it, because the pay-per-view is like $70,
but it's worth it, man. It's when it comes down to it, I don't know, maybe it's just me. Like I'm not a person, I never have done drugs in my life. I've never drank alcohol, but I feel like watching the UFC, it gives me that rush. It gives me that feeling of, seeing a great knockout or seeing a guy work to get a submission. I can respect all styles of combat and how it all just comes together, how a great technical striker can avoid being taken down, how, the opposite, where a wrestler can impose his grappling like Khabib or like a Kamaru Usman or a Colby Covington. I think that once you get to know the fighters and the fighting styles, and then you see them match up against each other with the personalities on top, it's almost like what wrestling is supposed to be, but it's done better and it's real.
To me, I like a good jiu-jitsu match. That when I first got into UFC, I remember it was on the Ultimate Fighter. So I would watch Raw, and then an hour later, Ultimate Fighter would be on. It was the first season. And then I was like, oh, this is kind of cool. And then it blew up, and then I slowly got into it more, and I actually went to do jiu-jitsu. So I did it for about 6 to 8 months. And knowing it while you're watching it, and exactly what they're doing, what they're going for, it made it so much better.
Yeah.
Right.
That's cool. That's good to know. Do you have a favorite fighter
of all time?
Yeah.
I think I'd have to take it back here. And I was just such a huge fan of George St. Pierre. Like, and I guess he might be maybe fighting again, possibly.
I don't know. I mean, I watch the French broadcasts here. They do, George St. Pierre is on with Patrick Cote and on RDS here, which is the French equivalent of TSN.
Yeah.
And hearing George talk, it doesn't seem likely. The only person he said he would come out of retirement to fight would be Khabib. And it looks like Khabib's retirement is pretty rock solid. So
I also feel like if GSP fought Khabib, we would go, ooh, GSP is not as good as we thought, because, Khabib's in his prime. GSP's, all respect to him. He's incredible. He's not the man that he was at one point.
I would beg to differ. I think it's more stylistically that George was always just an expert of figuring out how to defeat people who had kind of one-dimensional strengths. And I mean, Khabib is pretty well-rounded, but we know that the grappling, the Dagestani wrestling, that's really his bread and butter. And we've seen George neutralize all kinds of top-ranked wrestlers. He even tried out, or was going to try out for the Canadian Olympic wrestling team at their request because they loved his wrestling. I just think that George, his real strength is his mind, is his way of thinking. He's a strategist as much as he's a martial artist. And Khabib, while he's a great fighter, no denying that, I just feel like George was many levels above that generation.
I think George was many levels above, but how old is George now?
He's 39, I think.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, then maybe I don't know.
I mean, if Randy can do it at
octagon rust there.
If Randy could do it at what, 45?
Yeah.
50? He was up there when he won the belt back.
We got Alexei Olenik's fighting on the one tomorrow. He's pushing 50. Anderson Silva, Yoel Romero. You know,
but then you see like Anderson Silva's final few fights, and you're like,
yeah, it's like watching Ali in the late 80s.
Well, you know, in the UFC, there's only one fighter that's been undefeated, and that's Father Time. So it catches up to everyone.
Yeah. But I really like I said, UFC 2 was like when I started watching, but I really got into it in the Matt Serra, GSP, Frank Trigg, like those days, and like all the guys from that era. Like I remember going to like some UFC after party, and Phil Baroni was there. I was like, oh man, like I wanted to look like you. You were like what the jacked UFC fighter ever.
He always reminded me of Buff Bagwell, Phil Baroni.
Yes, he's like a little Buff Bagwell.
Yeah. Oh man, it's so cool to know that you're such a big UFC fan, man. We should talk more about it because I have not missed one. It's actually George that brought me back into being a hardcore UFC fan when he came back to fight Michael Bisping, who was the first and one of the only UFC fighters I had the chance to meet in person. I met him dehydrated, dry to the bone. He was almost ready to pass out after one of his weigh-ins. He came to a nutrition store that I happened to be working in and was just, wanted some electrolytes, some potassium, just wanted to rehydrate. So I've always really loved Michael Bisping, and knowing that him and George were going to fight, I couldn't miss that. And it just brought me back to the sport. I've never missed a UFC event ever since then. So
what's your favorite fight of all time?
Favorite fight of all time is the third fight between Frankie Edgar and Gray Maynard.
Okay. Yeah.
They had a trilogy. Now the first fight was, I think it was a decision for Gray Maynard. Frankie Edgar wins the lightweight title and now has to defend it against the guy who beat him in their first fight. They fought to a 5-round draw. And I mean, if you can track these fights down, like if you have Fight Pass, check out Frankie Edgar versus Gray Maynard. And that's to everybody out there, not just to Chris, but everybody. Find Frankie Edgar, Gray Maynard 2, and you will be blown away by how good that fight is. And believe me, Frankie Edgar versus Gray Maynard 3 is even better.
Yeah. That's a great trilogy.
What would be your favorite fight?
I think we're going to take it back here, but it was Matt Hughes and Frank Trigg. And Matt Hughes got that low blow that went like without any, the referee just let it go. And it looked like he was completely out of it, somehow turns things around and wins the fight. And I was just like, this guy isn't even human.
That was the one where he picked him up and he carried him across the ring and then dropped him, eh? Or was that the second one?
I don't know. Everything about that fight was unbelievable.
Yeah.
It reminds me a lot of the Scott Smith Pete Sell match. I think it was on the first Ultimate finale.
Was that where you got the liver shot?
When he caught him in the liver and then he knocks him out just as he's coming in. And especially if you watch that season, I have it on DVD. They were shit talking each other a lot too, so it was even better. Yeah,
man, we could talk about this forever.
We definitely could. That would actually be, if I could have one other job in the world other than making it big in wrestling, I would love to be an MMA journalist.
If you're fellow Montreal, what do you call people from Montreal?
Montrealer.
Montrealer?
Or an asshole. I don't know.
Yeah. French. French.
But if Ariel Helwani can do it, you can do it.
Yeah. He's got to return more of my tweets. Maybe we should get on him with the Jofo Mafia, because Ariel's someone else that I would really like to talk to. And yeah, he made it from Montreal. So it goes to show if he can do it.
And he's getting into wrestling now too.
Oh, he's always been into wrestling.
Yeah, well, he's stepping on our turf.
Ariel used to be hanging out. I used to see him at the Bell Center, which is our arena here in Montreal.
Yeah.
I used to see him in the back of the Bell Center before the shows. I was one of those big super fans. I was someone who, like, I once tried to go to all the WWE pay-per-views in a calendar year.
Wow.
That was like back before I got into wrestling. People don't know this. I'm a huge super fan. I used to go to the airports to meet wrestlers. I used to, I met tons of people before I ever had a tryout. I had met all these guys and hung out with them. We'd find out which hotel they'd be at. We'd stay at the same hotel. And Ariel used to actually hang out behind the Bell Center at the same times I'd be there, trying to meet guys and stuff. So yeah, he was hustling right from the start, and good
That's
on him.
what he does. And he went to Syracuse University only because he read in a magazine that was the top broadcasting school to go. And he went, oh, then I should probably go there.
Wow.
His story is just so fascinating.
That's pretty cool. So I wanted to also ask you too, you've done so many interviews. Do you have a favorite one?
I do. And it's just because, The Rock meant so much to me growing up. I was the kid in high school who'd ask people questions just so I could shout, "It doesn't matter what you think." So yeah, Rock was at the very top of my list, and he was doing a lot of press for like the movies he was doing at that time. So we're talking like the late, like 08, 09, 10. And all my friends were getting interviews with him. And I'm like, man, I hope I can get an interview with him one day. And it was at the start of 2012. I got him backstage at Raw when he was preparing for his match with John Cena for WrestleMania that year.
Wow.
So yeah, Rock's everything you want him to be. He's amazing. And, I joke like, oh, I've interviewed The Rock 9 times, not that I'm counting. Of course I'm counting. It's The Rock. He's awesome. But he's everything you want him to be. He's kind and he's nice and he's funny. And he has this star quality about him where he goes out of his way to make you feel special.
Wow.
And even though he's, one of the biggest stars in the world, he makes the moment about you. And that's something that's just so rare. And it's something I'll never forget.
That's pretty impressive. And by that same token, I mean, other than Kyle and myself, is there anyone that you've had an interview with that maybe you didn't like or didn't go the way you expected?
You guys are definitely the top of that list.
I would think so. Yeah.
Figures.
We strive for that.
Yeah.
Well, Kyle does.
Yeah. We're always on that list.
I don't know. Wait till you see the Sabu interview when I put it out next week.
Well, we actually had him on our show not that long ago, Sabu. And
nice.
No, I was pretty cool. I mean, he and I talked really well. He sends me the odd message every now and then.
No, he's super nice. It's just like, I don't know if he could hear everything that I was saying, and he was sitting kind of far away. So like, there were a lot of times he's like, "Oh, what did you say?" I'm like, here it is again. So it's just like, it didn't have the flow of what we have here on Jofo.
No. Well, sometimes it's good when things can be raw and authentic like that, and not not as polished as the top of Kyle's head.
Actually, it's not that bad today.
Wow.
It's like a nonstop roast here between he and I. It's
Love it.
It's pretty one-sided. It's kind of like if Andre the Giant were facing Rey Mysterio. So
and if Andre the Giant walked through and stole Garth Brooks' wardrobe. So
wow.
I got to give him a hope spot now and then.
So Chris, I got to ask, huge wrestling fan, what got you into wrestling? How'd you get into it?
I remember watching, like, it would be on at my grandfather's or my grandparents' house. And not like, my grandpa wasn't like a huge wrestling fan, but he just loved sports. And you know this, when you grow up in Canada, like hockey's probably always on TV, or maybe it's basketball or baseball. And if those weren't on, wrestling, he would just put it on. So I remember like finding out about like Sergeant Slaughter and the Bushwackers and Hogan and Andre and all those people. And I just was aware of it. But it was in the late 90s. I had a really good friend of mine named Vince. And in the 90s, when you had a friend, you did this crazy thing called talking on the phone. It's wild, right?
I think I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. So like this archaic thing. So we would talk on the phone all the time because he was my best friend. And I knew that, I knew every Monday at 9:00, our phone call would abruptly come to an end because Raw was coming on TSN. And then one Monday I went, all right, man, like, let's stay on the phone. I'll put it on. We can like talk about it. And I just got sucked into it. It was Austin McMahon was the big storyline at the time. And I went from watching like 0 minutes of wrestling in a week to watching everything. Cause remember, Raw used to play on TSN on Monday night, and then it would replay the next day at 4:00. Mm-hmm. And then I would watch WCW, and I would watch Nitro, and I would watch Thunder, and I watched ECW, Jacked Metal, Heat. I watched it all. And it was in that moment, I'm like, I think I want to be a wrestler. And I was on the wrestling team in my high school. And I remember my coach being like, yeah, that stuff's fake. Like what we do in here is real. And I was like, but I like that. It's like really entertaining. And I think it made me actually a better amateur wrestler because I don't know, I was that much more into it. But that was it. That was what really like kickstarted it for me. And then I became like the obsessed super fan that we all do, because there's no in between when you're a wrestling fan. You are either all the way in or you're all the way out.
That's right.
Now, were you one of those people back then, like you didn't want to admit to other people that you were a wrestling fan? Well, not 98, obviously, because that was like the era to be, but like now, like maybe 2010-ish, where you're like, oh, no, I don't really watch wrestling all that much, but
I mean, I would never deny it, but you get a lot of this, and you guys hear this all the time. I like wrestling. Oh, cool. I used to watch wrestling, way back in the day. And I'd be like, why'd you stop? I always ask people, why'd you stop? And it's so interesting hearing people's stories about like why they aren't wrestling fans anymore.
Yeah, like you got to stick with it. Like I feel like I paid my dues watching wrestling because I had to sit through like 2008 to now.
Although with that said, like it's difficult to be a wrestling fan from a time commitment. Like you're watching a lot, right? Like 3 hours on Monday, 4 hours between the two shows on Wednesday. Then you've got Fridays, 2 more hours, and then everything else thrown in between, Impact and when NWA was on, Ring of Honor. Like it's a lot. It's a lot to keep up on. I get that.
Yeah, but it's true. But I mean, if you think about it, I kind of like to look at it like people like to watch their daily soap operas. So it's kind of the same thing. If you're watching Days of Our Lives and you're watching The Young and the Restless, on a daily basis, you're putting in that same kind of commitment. I always say wrestling's kind of like soap operas, just with a lot more action and a lot weaker stories, I guess you could say, in most cases. But at its best, sometimes it's even better than what's going on those shows.
Actually, there's one story that I wanted to get your opinion on, just because you're kind of tied to it almost. It was the build up to Kane's release date for See No Evil, and they were billing it as he was afraid of the date, May 19th. So I'm sure you were watching it then. What was your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so that's my birthday, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I was just like, do whatever you can to put my birthday out there. But now anytime I mention my birthday, I get all these wrestling fans that are like, don't tell Kane about your birthday. So if I ever meet Kane, I haven't met him. If I ever do an interview with Glenn Jacobs, I just have to make sure to be like, that's not my birthday. It's any other day but that.
So with that said, you've accomplished so much. I love the fact that you're a self-made man. You've gone down the same roads that we have. I hope to be able to follow in your footsteps. What are the next things that you hope to accomplish?
Everything. I want to do it all. Like I feel like, that The Rock's always like stay hungry, and that's how I feel like I am. So I just want more out of every situation, out of every relationship, out of everything. So I've been auditioning I just auditioned for a commercial right before we got on here. I just auditioned for a TV show. So the goal is like to continue doing what I'm doing, but to also be like hosting a show like that you could watch on, a major network. So that's the goal, and to grow my podcast. So, wherever you're listening to this, you can find my podcast. We mentioned it earlier, Insight with Chris Van Vliet. I want my podcast to be like at the top of the charts every single week, because I think that if you're not aiming for that, what's the point?
Yeah. And also, guys, check his show out and leave a review, because he reads them before the episodes.
I do. I'm only going to do that till my birthday, though. I feel like, you tune into the show to listen to the interview. You don't tune into for me to like read these reviews about me.
I have been sending Bill Burr things for weeks on end since I started listening, and he still hasn't read it, but I still tune in just because maybe one day I'll be able to hear my name.
Good.
So
okay, maybe I keep it going then.
Yeah. I think it was 2,000 reviews before your birthday, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Man, somebody's been paying attention. Thank you. We're getting close. We're like maybe 250 short of it. So just keep aiming for that. Vague goals get vague results.
And you just you had the Bushwackers on recently, which I thought was absolutely hilarious, because I really enjoyed their Hall of Fame speech, because you never really get that many interviews with the Bushwackers. And it was a lot of fun watching it.
It was wild because Luke was in Tampa and Butch was in New Zealand. And I feel like Butch had better internet than Luke did, which, these Zoom interviews are great, but they're also like very frustrating at times, because like, even if there's that slight lag, it's not completely like a real conversation. So that was so fun to be able to talk with both of them. But there were a few moments where like one would start the story and then the other would like pick up the story, and then the other's like, no, you go. No. Okay. No, you. Okay. No, you go.
They're like the Walter Matthau and the Jack Lemmon of the wrestling world, I find.
Yeah. Just like that.
Yeah, no, I love them. They're hilarious. I'm a big fan of them when I was a kid.
I've been on a ton of shows with Luke, actually. Not so much Butch because of his condition and everything, but Luke is still going, and he's ancient. He's got to be like north of 70. I think he was 68 the last time I was on a show with him.
He's 74.
Yeah, because the last time I saw him was like 2014, 15, and he was like very late 60s at the time, but still going out there, still taking bumps, which I was trying to kind of discourage him. I was kind of being the young veteran to say, hey, you just got to come out and do this. And everyone's going to be happy for you. You don't need to be taking the sidewalk slam and this guy's finisher, but yeah, he wants to give the people what they want, kind of like us.
Exactly. And like the Dirty Heels. Shout out to the Dirty Heels.
Yeah, that's why I say it.
Exactly.
We podcast got to stick together.
That's it. We got to stick together.
And that's what we're trying to do. But yeah, no, Luke and Butch, they were one of my favorites growing up. I remember me and my buddies, we used to give people the battering ram in school. Remember when he'd put the other one in the headlock and he'd run at people?
Oh,
we used to get in a lot of trouble.
Yeah.
One of my very earliest memories was walking like a bushwacker.
Yeah, when they came out at the Hall, I think it was the Hall of Fame for 32, I believe, when they got inducted. Or, anyways, they had a great speech. They were basically comedians.
Yeah. Well, that's
Right.
Luke all the time.
Yeah,
Like I said, I've been on like a good 20 shows with him, and he's a riot in the locker room. Yeah, they actually played a rib on him one time inadvertently. It was a show we were doing in Maine, and I was there. Rene Dupree was also there too, another great Canadian. And there's a song playing, and Renee's like, Luke, I think that's you. I think that your music's been playing. You got to get out there. And he's like, what do you mean? And he's there. He's like wrestling in overalls, but they're like down around his ankles, and he was stretching. He wasn't even ready. His match ended up actually being about 4 matches later. But he puts on his suit, goes running out, runs out the curtain, and then realizes, oh, this is not my match now. And politely goes backstage.
he did an R-Truth.
Yeah, and I just looked at Renee. I'm like, Renee, you just ribbed a legend and a senior citizen here. Like, he's like, oh yeah, well, these things happen.
So I got to know, who's on your Mount Rushmore of wrestling?
Oh, good question. So the only reason I really defined this is because I interviewed Hogan and Flair at the same time. And I was like thinking about, I'm like, Hogan and Flair are going to be on most people's Mount Rushmore. So who are the other 2 members on my Mount Rushmore? And it took me a while because it's hard to narrow down to just 4. So for me, it's Hogan, it's Flair, then it's Stone Cold Steve Austin. And then for that final spot, and remember, I grew up in the Attitude Era. For that final spot, I'm like, I love The Rock, but The Rock has accomplished so much more outside of wrestling. Rock's way more famous for what he's done in Hollywood than he ever did in wrestling. And Rock's career is like 7 years, which is crazy that he crammed everything into that time. So the final spot goes to Undertaker. So Flair, Hogan, Stone Cold, Undertaker.
Yeah, solid. Yeah, it's a solid Mount Rushmore.
It's always going to be different with people's Mount Rushmores. Wrestling is a subjective sport. It's like, when I can show a wrestler to someone and never seen wrestling before, 10 people may say he's good. 10 people may say not their cup of tea, but that's what's great about wrestling. Wrestling, it's like the circus. You need lion tamers, you need clowns, you need strong men, you need acrobats. You need it all. You need guys like you who can, make up for what they lack in appearance with, having a few jokes here and there.
Well, see, that's the thing. Cause I'm a comedian not by trade, but I'm a stand-up comedian here in Montreal. And you don't want to be too jacked. Like, nobody's going to laugh at a guy who can beat their ass. So if I look like a fat guy, it's like, yeah, that guy's probably got some funny stories about being down on his luck. Like, I tell everybody, like, my body type, I always look like I'm going through a rough breakup.
Is this a Yuck Yucks?
No, we don't have a Yuck Yucks here. We have a Comedy Nest, and there's a lot of local shows here that we do.
There's no Yuck Yucks in Montreal?
No, they shut it down, I think, a long time ago, actually.
Yeah, it's a while ago.
Yeah, eh?
No Yuck Yucks, no Second City, no
Laugh Factories, nothing. No improvs. We just got the Comedy Nest, and me and a friend of mine, we produce our own monthly every one of the Saturdays at a local pub here, and just local shows all over the state. It's like independent wrestling. There's so much similarities between wrestling and stand-up comedy. It's insane.
I just had Ron Funches on, and he was saying the exact same thing because he's a huge wrestling fan and obviously crushing it in the comedy world. And he's like, oh yeah, like they're so similar.
Yeah. I mean, my goal is just to get famous just so I can go on Straight Up Steve Austin and hang out with him all day, just because I think that would be amazing.
It's a great goal.
Yeah. I mean, why not?
That's definitely not a vague goal.
No, it's not. It's very specific, and I want him to know that.
And I don't know if you're aware of what we're living through right now, just on a more serious note, but obviously COVID's a real thing. We are actually under the strictest lockdown in all of North America here in Quebec. Pretty much nothing's open. Restaurants aren't open. Gyms aren't open. We actually have a curfew that's in effect too, that at 8:00, if you're caught outside without being an essential worker, you pretty much face up to, what is it, a $6,000 fine?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So
I don't understand the curfew. Like what happens at 8:01 that doesn't happen at 7:59?
Well,
COVID goes to sleep.
Yeah. Well, the way they've explained it, and it's their words, not mine, because clearly they're paid to do this, and we're the ones paying them with our taxes. They feel that it is going to cut down on people gathering at other people's homes because they feel that's the biggest spreader here in Quebec. We did have the most cases in all of Canada as a province by province. In terms of by population, I think we were ahead of just about everywhere except for Brazil and one other country. So it was getting pretty bad in terms of cases. Deaths, we were doing okay, doing good, but a lot of cases.
We weren't killing it.
Yeah. That's why you're the comedian.
I just hope there's light at the end of this tunnel.
Oh God.
Like
Got to stay optimistic.
it's been a year of these restrictions. I just hope that there's light at the end of this tunnel.
At this point, I feel like the light at the end of the tunnel is just gonna be a train with COVID written on the side, and like COVID 21 or something.
Coming our way. That's the
Oh,
light.
God, yeah.
Oh,
I hope not. I hope I'm wrong because the world needs to open up. So
Well, yeah. I mean, when like me, for example, like 15 years of doing this, never took a day off. The biggest break I've ever had is 3 weeks. And that's just when Christmas and New Year's kind of line up close to each other on a weekend. No one wants to run a show. And this is by far the longest break that I've ever had. But you got to roll with the punches. You got to make lemonade out of lemons. And it's given me a lot of time to reflect. And even better than that, it's given me time to connect with people like you and, get to pick your brain and stuff and be able to, try to make the most out of what we're given and still use it to get to where we want to go.
yeah. There's so many bright spots in this COVID situation. And I get like, look, this has been really, really tough for a lot of people. And, some people have gotten very sick. Some people have unfortunately passed away. But there are a lot of bright spots in this. It's just a matter of like shining a light on those. I heard someone recently refer to this as the great pause. And I love that because that's exactly what it is. It's a chance to pause and go, what's important to me and who's important to me? And that's exactly what we're able to do right now.
exactly. I know a lot of people have actually started podcasts during this and have been very successful. Like we actually started during COVID and we're doing well. And I know a lot of our other friends who have started podcasts. So it actually helped a lot of people too, just figuring out what you're into and how far you're willing to go with your interests and your hobbies and whatnot.
Yeah. I wonder, I don't doubt you guys, but I wonder how many people are going to continue their podcast when the world gets back to, quote unquote, normal.
I mean, I'm still going to do it. I still have a 9 to 5 that I can do from home, but hopefully everybody else sticks with it.
I'm pretty sure we're going to stick with I'm willing to stick with it as long as we got the man behind the scenes over here to make us look good.
We got our Wizard of Oz behind the curtain over there. So,
and he does a hell of a great job.
So Chris, I just wanted to know, where can we find you on the socials for everybody else that doesn't know where to get you?
So I'm at Chris Van Vliet everywhere, VanVliet. Wherever you're listening to this, you can find my podcast, Insight with Chris Van Vliet, and say hello. It'd be great to say hello back to you.
And drop a review on his show. We're getting
I'll
to
read him out on the
2,000.
show.
We're getting to 2,000.
We will get him to 2,000. And the last thing on my end before going, because you say we can't make, vague goals or else it's going to be vague results. I got myself a pretty big goal that I'd like to accomplish. And I'd like to know, Chris, how do I become a guest on your show?
Oh my goodness. I think you have to get an O1 visa and come across the border.
Hey, that kind of falls in line with where I'm going. So
It all comes back to that, right?
I feel like Dwight Schrute said that in The Office. There was a term he coined called like Perfektenschlag, which is like when everything kind of lines up together. But I think it actually meant like pig shit or something like that.
No, guys, thank you so much. Appreciate you having me on.
Oh,
Hey,
pleasure's all ours, man.
I feel like I gained a lot of insight on this episode.
Puns of steel over here.
That's me.
Yeah, I mean, thank you for giving us so much time.
And honestly, such a pleasure to meet you finally.
Likewise. I look forward to meeting you guys in person when that's a
Absolutely.
thing again.
Once I get that 01, you and I will hang out all the time.
I'm usually in Barrie, Ontario every summer. So if you're ever in that
Hey, that's where
neighborhood-
my business partner lives.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, I usually get
Yeah.
down there once a year for the Boots and Hearts Festival. So
Nice. I've done so much fishing on Lake Simcoe.
yes, that's right. You had the the Bassmasters Amateur Big Fish of the Day Championship, I believe, right?
Yeah, I also own a fishing company.
Look at that.
Yeah.
I love that Bass Pro Shop down there. I think it's
Oh.
is it the North York Mall, I believe it is.
What's Vaughn?
Vaughn. Yeah, but I'm trying to think of the name of the mall though.
Oh, Von Mills.
That's the one, Von Mills. That
I
giant.
can't believe I remember that.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I'm surprised I forgot it.
Isn't that around where Trish Stratus had her yoga place?
I think so.
I feel like it's around there.
They have that giant Bass Pro Shop.
Yeah, it's huge.
Yeah.
Tag me when this gets posted. I'd be happy to repost it.
Definitent. And thanks again for being here, man. We really
Yes,
appreciate it.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you guys for being here.
Thank you.
Do hope
All
our
right, guys,
paths
have a
will
good
cross
night.
again.
Yes,
And,
you too.
Yeah.
Can't
Great
wait.
night.
Have a good night, sir.
All right, guys, be well.
Take care.
All right, see ya.
I feel inspired from that. I don't know about you.
Oh, definitely. A lot of great knowledge was dropped on us, on our listeners. I can't wait to read the comments, hear what people have to say. And I definitely think that we've built a pretty good relationship there with a fellow successful Canadian. And hopefully, once he's up to number 1, we'll already be creeping up on number 2.
We definitely got taken to the learning tree there.
We did. We
And
did.
Hell of an episode. I hope you guys liked it. And remember, wrestling is life.